Welcome to Career Tipper Podcast, hosted by Michelle Beatty. The Career Tipper Podcast is a motivational resource that shares career and entrepreneurial tips by industry experts that will help amazing people evolve to their professional best. And now your host, Michelle Beatty.
Episode 9 of the Career Tipper Podcast features Katy Widrick. Katy is a blogging and social media coach. As a consultant and strategist for business owners, bloggers, and emerging entrepreneurs, Katy specializes in helping set big picture goals for her clients' personal and professional life. She identifies opportunities for growth and creates actionable plans for making sense of what can often feel like an overwhelming and complicated online world. I'm your host, Michelle Beatty, career confidence coach and author. Katy, welcome to the Career Tipper Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here, and that was such a lovely introduction.
Thank you so much. This is going to be great.
Oh,
okay.
I'm so excited. I was just telling you before we started that I am a huge podcast addict, and I just get so giddy whenever somebody that I love and that I respect and look up to asks me to be a guest. And so I'm just so thankful for the opportunity and really excited to chat about this.
Oh, Katy, I feel like I look up to you. Like, you have been on this blogging grind for so long, and you're so transparent, and you're like grasshopper, caterpillar, butterfly, doing your thing. It's like you've been so transparent because you've been blogging like how many years now?
Yeah, I mean, so the short version of my story is that I started my first blog on Blogger or on Blogspot back in 2007. And the blogging world was still really, really new. Nobody, there weren't a ton of platforms out there. There weren't a lot of tutorials. And my first blog was called Silly Tater Tot. So that will show you what can happen in more than a decade of branding and online strategy and really growing into blogging and online world. I don't know of anybody that, that is successful now that didn't have sort of that same backstory where you learn and you grow. And I think in any project, your first iteration is probably a little embarrassing. I wear my Silly Tater Tot badge with pride because it is so indicative of everything that has come to be my business that I've just never been afraid to get out there and try it and look silly and look foolish and ask questions and learn from that and then try to teach others.
So what happened after Silly Tater Tot? Like, what's your journey been because now you're a coach, like you're coaching people. I've worked with you. I've seen what you've done with other people, like all different professionals just aiming to make their side hustle their main hustle, or they just decided, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Like, I love painting or whatever, and you help them. So how did you become this coach that you are?
Yeah, well, it is funny to look back and realize that the job that I do now did not exist in 2007. I mean, I think if I had wanted to find a blogging coach or an online strategist, there just wasn't that job title. And blogging itself, even though I know people had been doing it on other platforms for, as a decade or two before Blogspot and WordPress really took off, there really wasn't kind of that job title. So when I first did it, I really was in the position that a lot of people find themselves in even today, where I was working a job that I liked and that fulfilled some of my passions. I was working in a television newsroom at the time, but I didn't feel like I had a great outlet for everything else that was interesting to me. And so I wanted to talk about what it was like to try to lose weight and train for your first triathlon. I wanted to talk about what it was like to buy your first house. I wanted to talk about what I thought of Britney Spears' new music video. And there wasn't a place for me to do that in my professional life. And so I really started the personal blog kind of just as a place to be a journal. I pretty quickly realized as I was doing that what I thought was going to be interesting to me really was not. I mean, how many times can you talk about Hit Me Baby One More Time, and who actually wants to read that? I found just through the process of writing posts on my blog that what I liked to do was to talk about blogging and was to talk about social media. And so pretty quickly, as I was starting to create posts that were like how to run a Twitter chat, how to look at your analytics, Silly Tater Tot made no sense. And it was a silly brand from the beginning. It was a nickname that my now husband had given me. And so even, in our early marriage days, he would be calling me, hey, silly tater tot, because my name is Katy. So again, that pretty quickly did not fit what I was doing. And funny enough, I blog now at katywidrick.com. My business has its own URL and a totally different identity, but that was not particularly strategic, the move to katywidrick.com. I just knew that silly tater tot didn't fit. And honestly, I couldn't come up with a more creative name. Everyone around me had these great, memorable catchphrases. And I was like, I'm just Katy. And in hindsight, Michelle, that was actually a really smart play for me. I wish I could take more strategic credit. It was kind of just desperation. But what that allowed me to do was to feel like I had a place online where I could write about anything and everything because it always related to me. And that was always going to fall under my name. And that pretty quickly manifested itself on the lifestyle side because I went from not eating meat to really embracing a vegetarian diet to losing weight to kind of going into weight loss maintenance and then becoming a fitness professional. And I think in hindsight, if I had tried to do all of that on an old brand name, like silly tater tot, it just would not have grown with me. So I'm giving you a very long answer to what could have been a very short answer. But the reason that morphed into me becoming a blog coach was that as people saw me change URLs, change blogging direction, go away from talking about the personal life casting things to more tips and tutorials about a totally different topic, the more they would come to me for help and say, I don't feel like this fits me. How can I change? Or I saw your post on leading a Twitter chat. Can you help me become a Twitter chat moderator? And this was obviously in the early days but when Twitter was still the hot platform. But I really figured out pretty quickly in that context, probably 5 or 6 years into it, that my sweet spot and what I enjoyed the most was helping people with those tutorials and tips and feeling less scared by tech. And so that allowed me to start taking what was just kind of a hobby and turning it into a jobby. That transition has skyrocketed in the last few years, but that was really what turned the tide from me just being a blogger and then me working as a blog coach.
But I think it's interesting, even like from katywidrick.com, like you have 2 mommy blogs too?
Yeah, so it's funny because I'm type A and I'm super organized. Like my to-do list is color-coded. I have sub-bullets on my to-do list. That is like, people get overwhelmed by my to-do list and I'm always like, it is what calms me. So I share that only because it's a little out of character for me to have so many projects going on. Funny enough, when I started, I had one mommy blog on the side, bugchild.com, that's still active. I started it because when I was trying to get pregnant, it kind of goes back to when I started my original Silly Tater Tot blog. I had so much that I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about the struggles. I wanted to talk about what it's like when you hope that you're pregnant and you aren't. I wanted to talk about what I was eating, and I wanted to talk about that amazing feeling when I first did become pregnant with my now 5-year-old, but I did not feel comfortable doing that publicly. And it's funny because you were saying something to me earlier that I loved, and in the intro, you mentioned that I'm transparent, and that's always been really central to me as a blogging coach. I think there are enough people trying to hide all of these tips and strategies behind curtains and make it seem fancier than it is. That's not me. I want to rip off the curtains. I want everybody to come in and see. But on the personal side, that was a really good example where I was not ready to share that with the universe. I felt like this was such a personal thing. I was still kind of in the early weeks of pregnancy and in trying to conceive. And so much of that I just needed to keep to me. So I actually started this blog totally anonymously. I was posting about it in trying to conceive in pregnancy and family forums, and I had lots of secret friends who were reading the blog, but my family didn't know, my friends didn't know, nobody close to me knew. So here I was, super active on social media and posting all this stuff, and then I sort of had this hidden identity. After we announced that we were pregnant with my daughter, I was like, I can't keep this a secret anymore, and I revealed it to the world. It's funny, now I'm sort of in that struggle that I know a lot of bloggers get into, where I have lots of different interests, but not a lot of time. I don't have the ability to really spread my attention out on multiple blogs. So like a lot of my clients, I'm sort of reassessing what makes most sense, where I'm devoting my time, what I want out of all of it. But yeah, at one point I think I was running 5 personal blogs. I'm down to 3, which is pretty good. But then I live vicariously because I have dozens of clients who actively blog, and a lot of times I'm writing for them or on their websites, helping them with copywriting and strategy. So it sort of feels like I get to have the best of all of the worlds.
I love it. I love it. So through this entire journey, was there a moment, was there many moments, or was there a crescendo of moments that you knew that blogging was a game changer for you professionally and personally?
That's a really, really great question, because I want to say it was many moments. And in hindsight, if I had had a graph, I probably would have seen that crescendo. In the moment, it didn't feel like it was growth. I do know that at some point, I had to really turn inward and say, I can't keep helping people for free. And that was a really tough moment for me, Michelle, because I never, again, set out to say, this is it. I'm going to build this blog coaching business. I'm going to make so much money. I'm going to quit all my jobs. That was just never my intention. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am a business mind. At this point, this is what pays my mortgage. This is what puts my kids in school. And so I have to be strategic about that. And I think my attitude toward business in general has changed, especially as I have really grown my business. But in the early days, I felt bad about the idea of taking money for it. But I was at that point where I literally had no more hours in the day to email people and to respond to them and to write posts for them and to get in the back end of their website. So I know that at some point, probably around, trying to think back, around 2014, I had started to provide services, was definitely still doing it on the side, but it was the peak. If it was a crescendo of moments where it was leading up to this being a viable business, the peak of it was me. And I remember there was a night where I just said, I've got 15 emails left. I'm trying to do all of this. I've got other work to do. I've got to clean my house. I've got all these other things. And I was having a really hard time because I knew that I needed to make some decisions about the future of the business. So, and then, I had a big life change, which I think in hindsight, there's so many lessons you learn in hindsight. In the moment, it felt very challenging. But in hindsight, it was absolutely the most important thing that has happened to me personally and professionally. And that was, I was working full time for one company, running Make Media Over on the side, which, frankly, was a full-time job, and I was just sort of squishing it into the hours that I had in the morning and at night. At this point, my oldest daughter had been born. I had recently found out that I was a few weeks pregnant with our second daughter. Yeah, it was a pretty crazy life stage. And my husband came home and said, I have this amazing opportunity for my job, but it means that we've got to move to another city. And I said, okay, it was a big life change for us, but it was one that just felt right on all levels. And I said, I go back and forth on how woo I am on any given day. I said I was type A. I'm also a hippie. So on that day, I remember I was particularly woo because I said, this is the universe telling me, Katy, you have been feeling like you have to make a change. You feel like you're burning the candle at both ends. You have this viable business opportunity, and if you don't take it, you're going to burn out, or someone else is going to take it from you. So in that moment, I felt like, well, the universe is giving me that opportunity to say, you're going to move, you're going to leave this city where you've been for a decade. You and your family are going to pick up and forge a new path. And frankly, financially, you can't afford to not do something. So you better make this your new job. So that all happened pretty rapidly. I would say within 2 weeks, we had put our house on the market. We had started house hunting in a new city. I had basically put in notice at my full-time job. And again, all of this was happening while we had an active 2-year-old and a very active baby in my belly. So that was really when Make Media Over went to be and sort of switched and became my full-time job, my full-time income, my full-time attention. And that was a really exciting time. And that was in 2015.
I love it. I love it. And I think because I have coached with you at 9:00 at night after you working a full day. And I'm like, Katy, how do you do that? But that's when you know it's your passion, and your passion for what you do really is like contagious. So other people are like, oh, well, okay, so this is what it means like to hustle for what you want. You know, it's like a tangible, example of you practicing what you preach.
Yeah, and again, don't get me wrong, it of course it has been a business. I was always very thankful for that money because it meant that it empowered me to do other things. But at that point, it wasn't just about the money. Like, I wasn't just thinking, oh, this is an incredible income or revenue opportunity. But I think that validated it, that I was making enough money that I sort of knew at that point If let's just put it this way, if my husband had come home and said, we're moving to a new city, and I had not thought about Make Media Over, if I had not built the foundation, if I didn't have that revenue coming in, I know that I would have freaked out. Now, again, rationally, I know that I have skills that are marketable. I know that I could have gotten another job, but I think it would have been a much more panic-inducing moment, and I think I probably would have been more hesitant to take this risk and build the life that we genuinely wanted. I mean, it sounds really cliche, but we had been talking for years. We wanted to move closer to the beach. We wanted to move closer to a downtown area. We had all of these lifestyle things that we wanted, and the opportunity that literally was presented to him gave us all of those things. And I again, when I sort of sit and let myself think about how the last 5 years have really rolled out, I think what a shame that would have been if I had said no to this opportunity that was like, I couldn't have scripted it better. But if I had said no because I was so fearful of losing my income. So, I mean, again, all of that is just to say that the money was always important, but it was more of a validation that this was something that there was enough supply and demand, that my clients were coming back, that most of my clients, even today, I would say 90% of them are straight word of mouth and referral. I don't do a ton of marketing for myself. And so all of that really helped me feel much more confident about going out and saying, I am going to be taking this risk. It's going to be scary. Things are going to change, and I'm going to be my own boss. So there's not a safety net, but I have, 5 years of having built this as a side hustle. So it's not like I'm creating it from scratch. I just have to kind of flip the priorities and get really serious about it. So that was a really exciting and scary and awesome moment all wrapped into one.
No, I believe you, and that's why I feel like you do practice what you preach, which also connects to your transparency because people see it. Like, I know you're not a quote unquote overnight success. I know that you didn't just pick up today and just say, hey, I'm going to be a blogging social media coach. Like, I have seen you at conferences. I've seen you at mixers. I've coached with you myself. And I know that it comes from a sincere place. Like, it is a passion point. It is a passion that you turn to profits. But I know most importantly, the root of it, it's your passion.
Oh, 100%. And thank you for recognizing that and sharing that, because that means as much to me as anything else, that sort of what I do is recognize that, I think the passion, Michelle, is that when the transparency is just like, I've never been afraid to say, oh, I've been there. I screwed that up too. Here's how I fixed it. And I've got a quote. It's hanging in my living room, and it's actually a quote from The West Wing, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's just to kind of summarize it. There's this great moment where two of the characters are talking about helping each other out, and the story sort of ends with, the guy had fallen in a hole, and everybody walked by and was giving advice and giving advice and giving advice, and nothing helped. And then one guy jumped in the hole, and the first guy was like, what are you doing? Now we're both here. And the second guy said, yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out. That quote, like, even now, it sort of brings tears to my eyes, because that's the feeling, and again, not to get up on a pedestal, but like, there's not enough of that right now in the world, of people saying, I know, I've been there, and saying, I've been there, it's hard, it's frustrating, I totally, I want to validate that, like, this is tough. You broke your website, been there. You lost an opportunity because of something, that didn't go right with the brand, been there. You lost money on this, Like, let's compare bank accounts. But I did that last year, and here's how I fixed it. And from a very real sense, a lot of times that's a technical thing that I work on with clients. They'll call me in a panic, or someone will just email me and said, like, Michelle told me I should contact you because I updated a plugin on my site and now everything is gone. I think my ability to say, oh my gosh, I did that last month and I know exactly how to fix it, and let's do it together, that is just, I think that's more meaningful. At least for me, I want to be able to share with my clients that I didn't wake up as a WordPress expert. Nobody is born an online strategist. And I think, again, the pedestal time, I think there's enough in the online world, especially with people calling themselves gurus and ninjas and promising 6 figures overnight and 100,000 people on your email list. That's great. And if they have done that and they can do that for others, I am like, more power to you. That's fantastic. I am a dreamer too. But I guess I'm still the person in the trenches that wants to say, we can grow and we can get you towards your goals. And I feel very confident that we can get you from A to B and B to C. But let's do it together. And let's talk about meaningful and manageable steps. And let's get in there. And I guess the last piece of that, just to sort of tie in the whole transparent, holding your hand down there in the whole kind of story there, is that a lot of clients come to me frustrated, and sometimes they're a little apprehensive about working with a coach or working with a consultant or even having me do the work because they've worked with someone before. And I think what happens a lot, not just in my industry, but I think probably in any industry where there's a mentoring standpoint or a boss, a lot of times people just say, oh, it's so easy. You just, like, let's take email marketing, for example. It's so easy. You create a lead magnet, you send it in the welcome email, you send them a follow-up, and boom, you've got 100,000 email subscribers. Well, that's a great strategy if you know what a lead magnet is, or if you know how to add it to your email service provider. And the bulk of clients that come to me, even those who are hugely successful on other metrics, any metric you want, page views, money, I get some really amazing clients, but they'll come in and they'll say, I just listened to a podcast or I just worked with a coach and they said I've got to build my lead magnet. But what is that? So I always feel like my role, at least my spot in all of this chaos, is to say, oh, let's do it together. Let's log into your email service provider. Okay, do you see this button? You click this. And I feel like for a lot of my clients, they have felt let down or defeated because they'll listen to these, again, podcast episodes or go through a course or they'll hear somebody talk about what worked and there's no execution and there's no logistical help. And I've been there too, and you just feel more discouraged than ever because it feels like it should be easy, and then you sit down to do it and you're like, what is a lead magnet? So anyway, I hope that sort of answers your question and speaks to what I have really tried to build my business to be, which is more of a hand-holding and a safety net and a place to go and try new things, but know that you're not on your own. And when you need someone to come in and take over, like I'm ready to do that.
It's all good. And I think one thing that I always encourage people to do when they're thinking they want to work with someone, I'm like, if they have a newsletter, get on that newsletter and read their stuff. And so I say that to say, I get your weekly newsletter. It comes on Tuesday, right? Tuesday?
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to send. And I always joke that if I never got one new subscriber, I would still write it.
I believe that. The way you write it, I believe it.
It's so fun. Yeah, I send out a weekly email, and I am a big believer in newsletter marketing and email marketing. I think there is so much to do with it, and especially in 2018, as we are looking at different platforms making it harder and harder to reach your audience and to connect with them. And it's so much pay to play on some of these social networks. I still think email marketing is a real opportunity. But again, it sort of goes back to what I was saying, is that if you hear, even if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, Katy says email marketing's great, how do I do it? I really just want to encourage your listeners to go, whether it's find someone that can be a mentor or ask around or look for, great tutorials. Come to me. I love helping with this stuff. I just don't want anyone to hear it and think, well, great, now what? Because the now what is the missing piece. But yeah, I send it out and it's basically like I always think of it as a curated list of stories and headlines and that I think really are worth your time. There's so much noise out there, and it can be really hard to know which sources are reputable. Does this person know what they're talking about when they say something about the Facebook algorithm, or what does this person mean when they're talking about this, this email service provider? So every week I try to put together just 4 to 5 headlines that are in the news and sort of annotate it and say, here's why I think this is important, or here's my take on it, or after you read this, go read this, and just try to make a newsletter that I would want to subscribe to.
Okay, listeners, she's really downplaying her newsletter because that thing is so action-packed. Like, you read that on a weekly basis, and all her article to the verification, like, she makes it so action-packed with yummy data that you wonder, like, how does she have time for this and her family, in addition to everything? Like, the research she puts into it is no joke, and it's like a conversation in Katy's head, but it's definitely a worthy subscribe to hit your inbox and share some information. It's definitely worth the clicks and that email swap that takes place. So
thanks. I really appreciate that. Like I said, I love writing it, and I always, again, sort of ask myself before hitting send, is this something that I would want to read, or is it just more junk in my inbox? And sometimes I have had to pull myself back and say, nope, that's too much junk. Remove this, save that for next time. So I always appreciate when people tell me they like it.
But your disclaimer alone is very transparent. Like, I feel like your disclaimer, what is your disclaimer exactly? It's like, you don't have to, if you can unsubscribe if you want, I'm just sharing or something like that. Like, even that, you're just transparent. Like, okay, you might not want it anymore, but before you leave, like.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the nice thing, too, about email marketing and why I love it so much. I mean, the tools have changed so dramatically that now I can send a newsletter out, and my system is strong enough and set up the way, in a way that if somebody doesn't want to get my newsletter but does want to hear about my next ebook, or if somebody does want my newsletter but doesn't want, my new blog post, the segmentation of my email system is really strong. And again, it makes it easier for me to hit publish, to know that it's not a binary choice, really. Someone doesn't have to stay on or get off. They can stay on but update their subscriptions or pick and choose what they receive from me. And so that builds some confidence on my end that I don't really ever feel afraid of spamming people, because it's in their preferences, it's in their hands. And I get unsubscribes every week, and I try not to take that personally. I try to remind myself that sometimes they are unsubscribing because they have gotten so much good information that they're off to the races and they don't need me anymore. Or a lot of times I'll remind myself and clients that, I'm in other places. If they're getting what they need from me on Instagram, I'm super active there, then maybe they just feel like it's redundant or they don't need email. I am super okay with that, and I don't take those unsubscribes too personally. I guess I just always try to keep the big picture in mind. And there's an element too of blogging, and I know you know this, where you just have to say, like, I'm not going to be for everybody, or I'm not going to be for everybody right now, and I'm not going to stop doing my thing and what fuels my fire and what I think does serve people, just because I'm afraid that it might turn this person off. I try to be super inclusive. I really do try to keep, make sure that the content I share on the newsletter and social media is broad enough that it appeals to people. And so if they don't like this, they know the next thing I post might be of interest. But again, I'm not going to work too hard to worry about the people that don't want me in their life. I could not have said that when I started my blog in 2007. That has come with a decade of having comments and letting people hit reply and send direct messages. And I think a lot of people listening to this probably know what I'm talking about. Your skin gets thicker as you let people in. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and I do love writing that.
I think it's great. So after all of this decade of getting to this spot today, what do you want professionals working a 9-to-5 to remember when they're building their professional brands, that either for pleasure that turns to profit, or they didn't realize they had a little money pot and they need to nurture it? So what's the standout?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And of course, that could be a number of things. I think there are two things, if you'll indulge me. One is just a logistical thing. If you are serious about growing your business, even if you don't have the full-time hours to devote to it, even if you're still in the building phase, I think the sooner that you can recognize that things like setting up separate business bank accounts, setting up a business email, setting up even a basic website. They're super easy and very inexpensive to set up a very basic portfolio website just for your services. These are the things that both professionally in terms of how people are looking at you, that will make a big difference, but also how you run the business. And I know, again, I will get the phrase wrong, but I remember when I was working in an office, there was somebody who used to get in my ear all the time and say, dress for the job you want, not dress for the job you have. And I think there's an application there on the business side. If you want this to be your business, whatever that means, side business, just to, let you pay for your gym membership, which is frankly my entire goal when I started, all the way up through, paying your mortgage, going on vacations, making this a sustainable income, you sort of need to dress for the business you want. And there are some very basic, inexpensive things that you can do that won't commit you too far toward that business. So those are things that I think, again, if people are just getting on Skypes at night and consulting with people, or they've got an Etsy shop and they're selling some products or whatever it is, the more that you can operate as a business from day one, I think the more that you will be thankful as it grows. And then the other one is just more philosophical. I think when you start to take what you love and make it a business, there are some repercussions. Again, if you'll sort of indulge a story, I thought when I went to college that I was going to be an on-air sports reporter. 100%, that was my dream. I loved sports. I really thought I was going to love being on TV. And as it turns out, the first couple of times that I was on air and I was either covering a sporting event or I was on an anchor desk, this was back in college when it wasn't actual real TV. But the first times that I did that, I realized it took all of the fun of sports away from me. I dreaded watching baseball games, which had been the thing that I would run home and, get the TV on and watch the Red Sox when I was a kid. I dreaded looking at football season because I knew that I had to memorize stats, and it was not about the joy of watching anymore. It became very transactional, and I said, nope, that's not the job for me, and I shifted positions still in the broadcast industry for a long time. But I think people have to be prepared for some of that. When you go from like, oh, this is fun to do and cool, I make money, to this is how I pay my mortgage, you have to make some bigger, harder decisions, and you have to do projects that maybe you would have said no to before, or you have to have hard conversations with clients. And so I guess I would just say, make sure that as you grow your business, you really try to stay as true as you can to what gets you excited today. It can be really easy when you are growing your business at whatever phase that is to just start saying yes to everything. And again, transparently, I did that. I said yes to everything and anything. I was afraid to say no to projects. I was afraid to turn down clients. What if the universe said, that's it, no more? Or what if word got around? And that took a big toll on me and on my business. And the minute that I said, I need to buckle down and remember, I don't like doing some of this work. I need to refer that out. I'm not enjoying it. It's feeling like a burden. If you can sort of prepare for that, and as much as you can say, there are going to be things I have to say yes to, but I don't have to say yes to all of them. And just like sometimes I write a list. I have a whiteboard, and like I said, I'm type A. So sometimes I will write up there like, need to book a whatever job. And whatever I feel like, like the other day, I was feeling like I didn't have enough creative, like I wanted to write creatively. And so I said, need to book a newsletter writing job, because I ghostwrite newsletters for a number of my clients. And so then I put it out that I was looking for a client who might have that opening, and was able to book that job. So that was just like, that sort of refueled the things that I like to do. As long as there's something on my daily to-do list that I'm really enjoying and that is still back at the heart of why I started my business, that makes up for the times that I have to do things that aren't as appealing.
That totally resonated with me, because I feel like I've gone through that with Career Tipper. Without a doubt. Like, I went from the blogging, I wrote the book, I did the first podcast, I coached, and I'm like, okay, I felt a little overwhelmed trying to manage it all. plus working, a 9 to 5. And then I just realized my sweet spot with it all, which was the most unexpected thing, is that I enjoyed the podcast the most.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And again, I think I'm sure you have found, and you will find, and your listeners will find, that there are some things you have to say yes to. If you're serious about the business, there are going to be projects you have to take on or commitments you agree to that you're like, I wish I could just be doing something else. That's fine. I mean, that's your 9 to 5 too. I always remind myself when I get frustrated and I'm like, Katy, you're the boss. Like, you're mad at yourself. But I remind myself that this is a grass is greener moment. When you're in a 9 to 5 and you're wishing you ran your own business, you kind of forget the hard parts. When you're running your own business, sometimes there are lots of days, Michelle, when I go, man, a 9 to 5 would be so much easier. I wish I had someone telling me what to do. I wish I could end my day at 5. I wish that, someone else was in charge of telling the client their invoice was overdue, whatever that is. So you're going to have to suck it up and do some of that. But again, I think that what you just said is so important. And if you can say, this is the thing I love to do, I need to give myself space to do that, regardless of what it means strategy wise. I mean, like I said, the newsletter for me, that's my newsletter. I try really hard to make it strategic. I try really hard to make sure that there's something in each newsletter that really does build my business, whether it's marketing an ebook or an affiliate program or pitching my services. But even if that weren't true and if it never made a sale, that newsletter is the thing that I enjoy writing so much that it is like my outlet for that. And then I can go back to doing the stuff I don't like as much.
I understand. I hear you. So it's very clear that you believe working smarter, not harder, is like your compass, and is basically your compass for media makeover. So how is the strategy of repurposing helpful to any blogger at any stage of developing their brand? Because I know, like, you are the repurpose queen.
Yeah, I know. At some point, I'm like, maybe I never want to publish another post again. I just want to keep recycling and refreshing my old content. So the long and short of it is this: especially when you're talking about blogging and you're talking about SEO, and that stands for search engine optimization, and a lot of people feel overwhelmed by the idea of how to get good traffic from search engines, how to rank, etc. There's so much to be said for taking content that you've already done and sort of polishing it up. First of all, from a strategic standpoint, Google loves that. Google wants to see new, updated, fresh, relevant content. And I always think I personify Google a lot when I talk about it in terms of, working with clients. I know Google's not a person, or it's a team of lots and lots of really smart people and smart robots. But for this, I hope you'll indulge. Google is basically a matchmaker, right? So it wants to take people with questions and match them up with people who have the best answers. That's the beginning and end of it. And so it is always trying to see, like, who has the best content right now, right? It's not, if you've got older content and it's doing well, that's great, but new content is always going to get attention as well. And that new can sort of be used in air quotes, because if you update content, whether you're just putting some polish on it, you're updating the photos, you're adding some new text, maybe you're optimizing the title and the meta description if we're getting really jargony here. If you do all of those things, it's the same content, but it sort of has a new coat of paint. And Google loves that and picks that up and will reward you, not instantly, but very quickly. And so in terms of effort and kind of making the most out of your time, I always, when I'm starting with a client, will encourage him or her to go and look at the existing library of content that has been published, finding things that are still relevant, finding things that are evergreen. A tutorial or a recipe. A lot of my clients are food bloggers. Recipes really don't get dated. So finding evergreen content like that can be updated, refreshed, reshared on social media, put back out in the newsletter, all of those things, I think, in my experience with myself and with clients, has been that those efforts take a lot less time and have a lot bigger impact than just worrying about continuously cranking out new content. That is exhausting. You run out of ideas, you run out of steam. It can be really annoying to have to do this, especially if you put any pressure on yourself to post 3 times a week, 5 times a week. And I've got clients that still do that. To keep that machine running can be really, really overwhelming. And if you're not seeing the results, it can be discouraging too.
That's true. That's true. Now, I know like you shared that newsletters, that's like your sweet spot. And there's so many focuses, like digital brands have to focus on, but you're right. Newsletter is like the thing that a lot of people are promoting, especially like you said, with the focus of paying to play. But one thing is true that you see with the different influencers online, they'll say, yes, they might pay to play, but many of them will like raise their hand and emphatically proclaim that the money is in the list.
Yeah.
The money is in the list. So what are some things that you feel like a strategy or a mindset that you suggest bloggers and digital influencers keep in mind when they're producing it? Like, I know repurpose, but is there anything other than that?
Yeah, and I will tell you that I pay to play, and by pay to play, I mean I spend money on Facebook advertising, I spend money on Pinterest promoted pins. Like, I am not opposed to spending money, but for me, it's always very strategic in getting them somewhere. And most of my money on the personal side, most of my Facebook dollars go toward building my list. I have clients that have other needs, and that's why Facebook ads to me, that's a whole other episode. Facebook ads to me are one of the most underused tools for bloggers, for people who are building their brands, for service providers. But let's just focus on the newsletter for now. There are a couple of things that I always think are important. And again, my newsletter is an example. I believe very strongly in giving value for value's sake. I think that attracts your tribe. I think that attracts the people that you want on your list. And so for me, again, that's sending out a weekly kind of curated list of interesting information. For some of my clients, sometimes it's just once a month, sending a personal message, things that their audience doesn't see on the blog or doesn't see on social media, or just kind of fun, hey, I'm a real person, stories and narratives. So it can look like a lot of different things. In terms of building the list, I think that probably, again, not to go back to the cliche that I was laughing about before, but I do believe that a strong lead magnet, and we'll talk about that for just a second, I think that a lead magnet is always going to serve you well. A lead magnet, for me, can take on a number of different forms. I think historically, and most of the time, if someone hears that, they're thinking of a download. So click here, download my top 10 career confidence tips, and get my weekly newsletter, right? And as long as that lead magnet or the download is on target, is like right for the audience, those can be hugely successful. And I have 5 of them. So I am I believe in lead magnets. The other thing that people, I think, often overlook, and this is something I build with a number of my clients, is really just kind of content upgrades. So for example, I have a client, a registered dietitian client who I worked with, and she wanted to do a video series and sort of empowering and teaching people about body image and intuitive eating, and like her sweet spot as an RD is really in this kind of body positive movement. And so rather than having a lead magnet, she wanted to make sure that people who read any posts on body image from her site were invited to join this free video series. And so in her case, rather than really focusing on a specific download, we really thought of it as almost like a mini e-course. So people could sign up and they get 5 weeks of emails from her once a week, with each one with a new video. I mean, she recorded it on her iPhone. We dropped in a little bit of text, but it's done really well because it's totally on message, on target for her audience. It's packed with value. If they watched all 5 weeks of the videos and never did anything, they would have gotten a ton of value out of it. But for her, it's also a nice way to build her services a little bit and kind of introduce herself and her approach to people who might be put off by just a services page or book a consult with me. So I think things like that, if people who are listening now or who are building their business, if you can kind of think about what could I give that's very valuable to my audience, that gives them enough content or enough in return for their email address that they're going to feel like it was not even just an even exchange, but they got the better end of the bargain. That's all great. And then if you can strategically write that, whether it's that lead magnet or a video series or something else, if you can write it in a way that really compels people to want to stick on your list, that's fantastic. And just a quick example of a new email sequence that I have. And again, I built this solely for the value, because I love talking about being efficient, and I love talking about structuring your day and what tools to use. And I found myself repeating that information to clients and to friends and on podcasts. And so I built a free email course. When people sign up, they can opt in for that or one of my others. But when they opt in, they're going to get 14 days, basically, of emails from me with a specific action item. So it'll be like, today we're going to tackle your inbox. Here's how to get to inbox 0. Here are my favorite tools. Here's what I do. Email 2 might be about how to do a power hour. And that's a big concept that I talk about with my business clients. How to structure your work day, even if you're working a 9 to 5, so that you every single day have a power-packed hour of building your business. So anyway, that's just an example of, it's a totally free series. I've written it without a whole lot of regard for whether that brings me new business or new clients or what I do with them. It's just kind of the tips that I wish someone had shared with me. But I know, frankly, Michelle, that it probably will build me business. It has affiliate links in there that will make me money if someone makes purchases or signs up. I'll be talking about how I can help them build their own email marketing or help them put together a lead magnet or a sales page. You know, some of that will be sprinkled into the emails. And so it's going to do both of those things. And the response to that, just like I haven't even launched it, the response just in the pre-launch phase was tremendous. And so that has helped me build my list even more.
I believe you because you are a pay it forward person. So you over deliver on content, which makes people trust you because they get that taste test of what you're offering. They're like, okay, this is meaty. This can fill me up. It can get me to my next space I'm doing. So I like this. This works for me. So I think I might need to sign up for your course myself.
Yeah, I'm so excited to share it. And it's been really fun to put together. Because again, it's all of the things that I've learned in 3 years of running Make Media Over as a full-time thing, and really the decade that came before that, all of the things that I learned to manage when I was working a full-time 9 to 5 and trying to do the job, the side hustle in the morning and at night and on weekends. And so you'll see, and if you're a listener, sign up, they'll see it's packed with a lot of those sort of anecdotes and stories about how I tried to tackle my inbox when I had 5 inboxes, 5 basically work-related items would come in at any time, and it was really overwhelming until I found a system that worked.
Systems are everything.
Mm-hmm. And I love systems.
Systems are everything, and then I think when anyone takes advantage of like a free 14-day trial from someone that they think they can learn from, it's important because regardless, you need to stay in student mode. Even while you're looking for a teacher. So I think it's always good to stay in student mode anyway, because it keeps you're always going to find, most of the time, you're going to find information you didn't know that you needed.
That's so true. I'm going to steal that from you. Always stay in student mode. That's a really, really good tip.
That's my mantra. Now, I know earlier you mentioned like SEO, and I definitely think it's like an ongoing mystery. Like I'm always like, what? Like I know I read about it, and I try to implement it myself. But what are some clues to help make SEO easy to understand?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2 quick and easy ones because I think really SEO is made out to be more complicated than it needs to be. Number 1, I told you that Google's a matchmaker. So if you never think about the word optimization again and you only have this takeaway, just go out and take a few moments when you're working on a project or a post or whatever it is and try to figure out, what are people in my space asking? And a good example for me would be building my newsletter or working on a new post. What are people confused about when it comes to Pinterest? I'll just take 30 seconds and say, people don't really know how to verify their website for Pinterest. Okay, I can talk about that. Okay, people seem a little bit confused about how to set up a Facebook or a Pinterest ad. Okay, cool. I can talk about that. So like right off the top of my head, that's 2 ideas that are very SEO friendly, that are already optimized because I'm writing content that a lot of people are looking for. And again, Google is just trying to get more qualified answers to those questions. So a lot of like a trick I use is Google Auto Suggest. as you're typing in, Facebook something, or what do I do with Facebook? If you kind of look and see what Google auto suggests to you, that's a good indication that a lot of people are looking for that. And again, if it fits your audience, it fits your niche, then go for it. If you feel like that's way out of left field, I don't know the answer to that, then let it go. That's for someone else. That's someone else's idea. The other trick I have is to do that same thing on Pinterest, and I use this a lot with my clients and with my own work. So for example, if a client said to me, I want to work on a new casserole recipe, what should I optimize for, or how can I make mine special? I will go right to Pinterest and I'll type in casserole. And again, two things will happen. First of all, Pinterest auto suggests like a finishing phrase too. So it might say weeknight casserole, vegan casserole, casserole with leftovers. So right off the bat, I would write every single one of those down, because Pinterest is basically telling me, hey, a lot of people are searching for this. Right? So that's a lot of ways that I will optimize. And then the other thing I do on Pinterest is I would type in casserole and hit enter, and then see what comes across the film strip. And Pinterest users will know what I mean. You don't have to be super active on Facebook to use this trick. Just create an account and use it as a keyword tool. But again, you'll see the little film strip. It's kind of targeted interests that are designed to help the Pinterest user, the person who's searching for content. But it's a nice hack that we publishers can use too. So that's number one. And if that was all your SEO, I'm using air quotes which your listeners won't see, but if that's all the SEO you did, then I think you'd be far ahead of other people who just come up with an idea and put it to paper. The other thing I would say, though, is that, again, going back to your existing content, and again, not to over jargon this, but there's a feature called SEO title and SEO meta description. And if you were to Google, let's just say we Googled casserole or Googled career podcast, what happens is you get a list of results. It's usually 10 per page on Google, and you'll see that there's a clickable title and then almost like a little excerpt or a little description. That clickable title is the SEO title, and what appears below is the SEO meta description. And whether you are on WordPress or Blogger or Squarespace or Wix, you actually can control what appears there. And it can be different for the search engine results page than what you actually put on your blog itself. So again, I might have a post called That Crazy Time I Was on Michelle's Podcast, which is a fun title, right? That's going to look cute and clickbaity on social, but does nothing for me for search. So my SEO title might be something like My Top Career Confidence Tips with Michelle Beatty, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the meta description, again, would sort of speak to, I would keep in mind, somebody is seeing this on that results page. What can I write to get them to click through mine? What's going to describe the post in a way that it will show them that it's a good match for what they were looking for, but what makes mine special? So again, in that meta description, I might say something like, and again, at this point, you're not getting really clever or sexy. You're just kind of like describing what it is. On Michelle's podcast, I talked about my favorite systems, why I love email marketing, and the surprise title that my first blog had. Right? So like it's telling people I'm a good match. You wanted this career confidence info. You found me, but also you need to click through because I've got a little sweet treat waiting in there. So optimizing your existing content, going back to your library and just tweaking that SEO title and meta description. Again, you'll have that option no matter what platform you're on, and it's something that a lot of people overlook or are confused by. That SEO title and meta description, if you update those, you will see big dividends from search traffic, and it's super easy to do.
Thank you for sharing that. Those were great tips.
I love SEO, so anytime I can nerd out on keyword optimization, I'm going to do it.
Love it, love it. Now, we both know perception's reality, and I know earlier you mentioned how you work with brands and you've had winning moments and you've had moments of lessons, because I don't like to say loss. I like to say lessons. You learn, there's no failure. You learn from those moments. So when it comes to establishing partnerships with brands and monetization, how important is to have a media kit? Like, I think sometimes people are like, hey, I'm amazing, work with me. And it's like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah, I think what you have to remember is that the brands that you are going to be working with are just as busy, if not busier than you are. And the more low maintenance that you can be, the easier the yes is going to be for them. So if they have to work to find your link, if they have to work to click through your Facebook page and your Instagram and your Twitter to see how many followers you have, every jump that you make them do, every click that you make them take is getting you further and further away from getting the yes. So I think the media kit is very important because, again, it establishes that you understand what they're looking for. You're saving them time, which they're going to immediately know you're going to do in the partnership as well. And it also gives you the ability to tell your story in the most positive light. Now, I'm a huge Scandal fan. I'm like, Olivia Pope is my girl. She wears the white hat, and I always want to wear the white hat in my business. So I would never say put something on the media kit that isn't true. Having said that, you and I both know that there's an art of storytelling. And if you are particularly strong in one area and maybe weaker in another, then you can put your positive attributes at the forefront. So, for example, I have a client who is just building page views on her blog, but has a very engaged audience on Instagram. It's growing quickly. It's higher than most of the people in her that would be sort of competitors. Her blog stats aren't nearly as impressive. So on her media kit, we really lead with the fact that she's active on Instagram. People love to comment. She's got a lot of visibility. And then we kind of talk about the blog stats later. And that also gives us an opportunity when we're pitching to go Instagram forward in the pitch, because we also understand that a lot of brands are maybe looking for kind of diversifying the types of bloggers that they work with and the platforms on which they're active. So the media kit to me is, again, it's two birds, one stone, and it couldn't be easier to put together and just keep it very simple. Here's who I am. Here's about me. Here's about my blog or my brand. Here's a quick look at some of my statistics. Here are the services that I offer, and don't forget your contact information, because I would say 1 out of 5 media kits that I look at does not have an email address or the website link. So if you have all of that, then it really empowers you to take a more forward approach in presenting to brands. And in my experience, they've all gotten really smart now and will ask for it. That's cool. And then we don't have to do the trifold anymore. It can be a one-pager, right? Oh, absolutely. I honestly, the one pager and even page, it feels very analog in a digital world. For most of my clients, it's a template that we keep on Canva, which is an online-based graphic design program. Of course, if you use something like InDesign or a more robust graphic design program, that's great. But at this point, all of the media kits that I work on and export are usually exported in a PDF file or sometimes an interactive web page, so they can be changed pretty rapidly and just attached in an email. So I think the simpler, the better. There are definitely times when I have done more of a presentation deck style for clients. But in that case, it's really to showcase case studies. Hey, when we worked with client A, we had this metric, this metric, this metric. Here's a picture. When we worked with client B, who had these goals, we were able to get this, this, and this. That's really a different stage of business and a different type of blogger. For 99% of people who are trying to do this, I think a one-pager, super simple, is absolutely the way to go. Thank you. I think it's important for everyone to know their options, because it can be so overwhelming to figure out where's your starting point beyond managing your social media accounts. Like, what is a door opener for you for them to say, hey, have a seat at the table? And sometimes it is the media kit. Yep. And perfect is the enemy of done, right? And I am a perfectionist at heart. I am constantly trying to make things better or bigger. But I think in my experience, both as a business owner and working with clients at different stages of their business, I think we get to this point where we will put off the launch of a project or the next step because it's not perfect. And while I never want anyone to put something out that they're not proud of, this is a world in which things are moving quickly. We can iterate and we can update often. And I would much rather someone send something that maybe isn't perfect, but is good enough to open the door and then come back and tweak it. Honestly, like, some of my best projects are things that my ebook has been released 3 times. Because that does well each time. And to me, again, maybe it just goes back to sort of constantly being transparent and showing how to add value. But as new things come up, I update the ebook and make sure that I push that out. But if I waited until all of that content was ready to go, that, I would never launch it. So send that email, create that media kit. Don't worry too much about things being perfect. Make sure that you're proud of it, but simple and elegant is perfectly fine.
Thank you for the reassurance, because I'm sure someone will need to hear that. They need to reassure that start, get it out there, and you can always perfect it. Now, Katy, I know earlier you vaguely mentioned that you're into, you had an amazing weight loss journey to preparing to be a mom, and that led you to becoming a professional trainer and fitness instructor. So what experience led you to becoming the fitness advocate? Where did that come from? Because I know, I've been to one of your classes, and you are energy girl. You're energy.
I'm glad you didn't say that I'm mean.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is that when I came out of college, I had studied for a broadcast journalism degree, and like many people do who are just getting started in the television and broadcasting business, I was working a weekend shift, and then the weekend shift turned into an overnight shift, and the overnight shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was sleeping when everyone was awake, and everyone was sleeping when I was awake, and it was a really tough lifestyle, and, in news that will shock nobody, I was eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and, just not taking care of my body. I was sleeping 4 hours a day, and the sleep wasn't good. It was in a very, very high stress environment. And so I pretty quickly put on weight. The freshman 15 that I had already put on in college sort of ballooned to the, young adult 50. It was taking a pretty, you were talking about the mementos crescendoing. My weight was really coming on, and I was very, very unhealthy. I didn't feel good about myself. Forget the scale. I just didn't feel like myself. And so when I left the newsroom in 2007, and was still working in the industry, but in a different job in a traditional 9 to 5. I remember the first week on the job, I was like, there are no more excuses. I'm sleeping now. I'm eating a normal meal schedule. I'm less stressed, but I still feel pretty bad about, and again, it wasn't the weight so much. I just didn't feel great in my body. And so in that moment, and this was again back in 2007, I just said, I don't have any more excuses. I have control over this situation. So I went to Weight Watchers. I've shared a lot about that on my blog, The Good and the Bad. I ended up losing over 40 pounds, kept it off, and then in the process of having to sort of maintain this weight loss and get and stay in shape, I realized that I just love group fitness. Love it. Sign me up for 7 classes a week. I am in. And I guess maybe it just speaks to the blog coaching side. I always, you can hear my little ones knocking on the door. For your listeners, I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old who do not respect the 9 to 5 job. Anyway, so I went from taking classes to really wanting to teach them, because I've always really loved being a leader and being in front. And I knew selfishly too that would require me to stay fit. So so I got certified as a personal trainer, started teaching group fitness classes, and while I'm not doing that as sort of an active, full-time income thing, it's funny because now that has become my side hustle. That has become the thing that is nice, just coffee money, and I do it because I love it. But it's a very different field, and I really like it.
I think that's great. So how has being focused on your health helped you manage your professional tasks?
So awesome question. I think, again, I know how well I operate when I'm feeling good, and I know how poorly I operate when I'm feeling bad. And again, that one is binary. Treat myself well, I work well. Treat myself poorly, I work poorly. And I also don't have the luxury anymore of doing bad work. Not that I ever did, but I do work for my clients now. So my business is not really even my brand. I manage other people's brands, and if I don't bring it every single day, then I'm letting them down. And that feels like a tremendous opportunity, but also a responsibility. So it's not perfect. I think certainly anybody who runs their own business, whether it's an hour a week or 40 hours plus a week, knows that self-care is one of those things that you should prioritize, but you can't. I try really hard to set boundaries. I'm at the stage of my business where, I have gotten much smarter about that than I was a few years ago. I work a certain set of hours a day, and then I close down the computer and I spend the afternoon with my kids. I work out 5 days a week, and that I will schedule that before I schedule client consults. I practice yoga. I do meditation every day. I do these things because I know that they make me a better overall person, but certainly they make me a more effective business owner. And when I skip it, I feel like garbage.
No, but that's the transparency in you. Like, it's true. And the more I listen to other podcasts, and anytime the health question comes up, most people that are managing their brand, or it's robust and it requires travel, and like you said, managing family and working for others and keeping up with the volume, a lot of them have shared that something happens within them internally, like that fitness, like you need to take care of yourself. It's like an alarm, and they have an awakening because they want to be present. So I love that you shared that, because I feel like you prepared yourself, and you help others be in tune too. Because I know, I have witnessed you encourage people to embrace self-care. So it's huge.
Yeah, and I think, again, some of this just comes from doing it and learning it as I go. But one thing that I talk about in this email sequence that I mentioned and that I talk about with clients all the time is I literally schedule my workouts. And so I have a system set up for booking appointments with me that's totally automated and totally done through, a calendar service. But I add my workouts to the calendar every week, and it blocks that time out. And only in an emergency will I cancel a workout to chat with a client. Now, the flip side is that I work at 5:45 in the morning so that I can take that hour for my workout and not feel like it's cutting into work time and not feeling like it's getting me off track. But again, just to sort of pull back what we were saying about not saying yes to everything, I could certainly, that's 5 workouts a week. That's 5+ hours of work that I could do, but I'm not willing to make that exchange at this point in my business. And so I would rather not offer those 5 hours of work, because I know that the 5 hours of working out is, in the big picture, is a better fit.
Totally. Now, Katy, you are a resource, you're like a resource go-to. So what are some of your must-haves, for resources or tools that help you do what you do?
Well, I will give a little plug. I actually have them listed on my website. It's makemediaover.com/recommended, and that is constantly being updated. So as I come across new tools or systems, I add them there. And again, that goes back to, I always just want to have a place where I can send people, because if it's helped me, then I desperately want it to help other people. There are a couple of things that have helped me. In terms of building my business, there's a tool called Dubsado that I swear is the biggest game changer I've had. It's the thing that I use to really systemize all of my client management, whether it's somebody who's interested in working with me, straight through somebody who's been with me for 2 years and needs recurring invoices or needs a client portal. That's all built into this tool called Dubsado that I think is really, really excellent for any stage of business. Then there are other things that I mentioned, the calendar tool. I use Calendly. There are a couple of others like Acuity and some other tools. But that has allowed me to spend a whole lot less time figuring out are you available at this time on this date? Oh, no. Here's my calendar. You can see my openings. You can book it. You can save the spot. Things like that have made it so that I spend a lot less time on the minutia of running my day and actually can focus on the work. And then I would say the third thing from a business standpoint, I mentioned email marketing. There are a number of great providers out there. My personal choice is ConvertKit. I mentioned that it allows you to do a lot of that heavy segmentation, a lot of automation. I have, I think, 7 different freebies right now between lead magnets and these email sequences, and they're all run from one dashboard very seamlessly and in a very user-friendly way. So things like that, I'm always looking for things that make make my life more streamlined and more efficient, still allow me to be creative and do my thing. But yeah, those are 3 tools that just come off the top of my head as standouts.
Well, thank you for sharing, because it's always, like I said, you always can learn something when you're in student mode, like a resource you didn't know you needed. So anyone listening, I feel you're in student mode and you just got some nuggets that can help you.
And you've got 9% of my battery left, so you get to ask me all the questions you want for 9% of my battery.
Well, we are wrapping up, because I'm about to say thank you, Katy. I appreciate you being a guest.
How's that for efficiency? That means you see into my computer. It was such a pleasure, Michelle. Thank you for letting me go off on these tangents, and thank you for letting me share so much about myself with your audience. Like I said, I just love this community, and I often think if there were an angel investor that could come down and give me a bunch of money, then I would do what I do for free. So maybe that's kind of the takeaway too for your listeners, is that if you can figure out, like, if somebody could just pay you a big chunk of money, would you still want to do what you're doing? And if the answer is yes, then you're on the right track. So thank you for letting me share all of that, and thanks so much for introducing me to your listeners.
Oh, you're welcome. But is there a favorite quote or an affirmation that's career tipping? Because that's how I like to end my episodes with whoever my guest is. I like to know what their career tipping affirmation is.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I am a quote fool. But here's, other than the one I shared earlier about the guy in the hole, thing. I've been here before and I know the way out. For me, that's still kind of, for my business, that's a mission statement, really. But there's a quote that I use ad nauseum, and I believe in it so much, and it's that a rising tide lifts all boats. And my feeling is that when you turn and you're worried about what the person next to you is doing, or the competition, or that person has more of this, that's noise, and that's nonsense, frankly. When we all do our best and we help each other and we give value for value's sake, the tide rises, and I promise your boat will rise as everyone else's does. And that's why, even though, again, it's a business and I am somewhat mercenary and I do have to think about what I'm doing, how that affects my revenue, and I'm making choices that way, I really try to remember that when you do good and you put good out there and you try to help for help's sake, it comes back to you.
It does.
So a rising tide lifts all boats.
And how can the listeners get in touch with you?
I would love to connect with them. My branding and business website is makemediaover.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at Widrick, and I would love to hear from your listeners. Tag me, tag Michelle, let me know that you heard me on the show. I would love to follow you back. And my personal blog, the former Silly Tater Tot, that is now katywidrick.com, which is just my name.
Love it. And you can find me, Michelle Beatty, at careertipper.com and on Instagram at careertipper. And please stop by and sign up for my newsletter. Some great...
Yes, do it. Get on that newsletter.
I'm sharing career tipping tips and upcoming guests. So thanks for joining us today. And remember to be confidently you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Career Tipper Podcast. We're grateful for our listeners and guests. For more resources about how to evolve to your professional best, share your comments and feedback about this episode and your suggestions for future guests, visit careertipper.com. Until next time, be confidently you.